Hi there, here is Danny. Just a quick update. Thank you so much for sending me emails with the links to the reviews of your own bikes. I'm gonna edit those and post very soon on the channel, so thanks for that. Today we talk about disc brakes, actually about replacing the pads. And I'm going to show you the process of replacing the pads on the hydraulic disc brakes, which is quite easy and simple and quick. But I'm gonna point out 4 mistakes that many of us, including our local stores, sometimes make, and it does make a difference in the performance of our brakes. So let's do it. The first step we all have to make when replacing the pads is actually finding the right type of the pad. And as you can see, the pads can have different shapes, different systems of assembling those on our calipers. So I need to know what pads will be compatible with my Shimano M425 model. As you can see, this one looks different than this one. This is for Magura, so I'm not gonna use this one right now. But the second step we need to make, so I know these will work with my model of the brakes, but the second step is to find and choose the right compound. As you can see, I have here the Kevlar pads, I have ceramic ones, I have sintered, I have semi-metallic. Which one will be the best one? And that's where some of us make a pretty important mistake. And so we want to take a look at our disc brake rotor, and here it says specifically resin pad only. This is the Shimano entry-level disc brake rotor. You can see the model here. If it doesn't say anything specifically on the rotor, that would normally mean you are free to use any type of pads, but here resin pad only means only resin or organic pads. Why is it so? These entry-level rotors are not hardened as much as those more expensive and higher quality. So you need to use the right type of the pad. Now you can find many different stories on the forums. People use, without knowing that they have the rotors for resin pads, they use metallic, they use ceramic or whatever, some higher density, and they experience no problems, but their rotor will wear down quickly. So they say the braking power is okay, there is no noise, it's nothing that they would notice, but the rotor will be just being consumed more quickly. So if you are happy with your rotors, you don't want to, there's no need to spend the money and upgrade the rotor, just buy the right pads for your rotors, and so you will avoid the first mistake. And now we almost proceed to the process of replacing our pads. You don't have to remove your wheel from the bike. Using just white piece of paper will always help you to look at your braking pads and see how thin or how thick they are. Now here, one important thing. The manufacturer usually would tell you that the pad should be 1.5 millimeter thick. That means 1.5 millimeter of your braking compound, not a whole thing, because here we have the plate and this is the compound. So 1.5 millimeter, that's the thickness of the compound. That's the material that we use for braking, not this plate. Others would tell you what should be the thickness of a whole thing with the plate, so make sure you do the right thing, but it's no-brainer. Usually the compound should be just around 1.5 millimeter thick. Can it be thinner? Yes, it can be thinner. The thing is that since once it's 1.5 millimeter or less, it means you can wear those down in the wet conditions or some high speed pretty quickly and lose your brakes. That's why the manufacturers would tell you 1.5 millimeter, that's the thickness of your compound limit. All right, so we know the thickness, but the second mistake I'd like to point out here is that most of us will only replace the pads because they are thin and not because they have lost the braking performance. And that's super important thing, because many of us do different mistakes in the cleaning of the bike. So look at my episode from the last week or 2 weeks ago. when the lubricants from your chain, from your drivetrain, go to the non-drive side of the bike and contaminate the brakes. The problem with the performance of your brakes is that sometimes they lose the performance just gradually, and you think they were just braking like that at the beginning, but they weren't. So since when your braking lever is not getting spongy, that means you don't have to bleed the brakes, but you're not quite happy with the braking performance, that could mean there is some oil, some lubricant. Sometimes when we just ride in the rainy conditions through the city is contaminated by cars a lot, and when you're commuting a lot in the rain, cheers to London and UK, that may be the very good reason to replace your pads. So second mistake, replacing the pads only when they are thin and not when they are contaminated by some lubrication. It's a tricky one because we are just not sure. We say, well, the brakes could be better if you are racing, if your safety is really an issue there. Think about whether they are clean or maybe some oil got onto them. So that was the second mistake. So here's the third thing. I have already chosen my braking pads. Since I'm doing comparison of different compounds, I'm starting with the Kevlar one on my e-bike, Marine Pine Mountain. And so I have the right one, I want to replace it. And first thing we need to do, and you will find it on any tutorial on the internet, we need to reset these pads. I have the camera here, okay. So we need some kind of a braking pad pusher for resetting those. Some people use the tire levers for it because these are made of some kind of plastic and pretty thin and quite, let's say, white with nice width. You can use also just a screwdriver as I'm using, but the mistake is we push it in between the braking pads in order to reset those, right? Because when we wear those down, they will be closer, getting closer and closer. The pistons will be more standing out from the calipers. And then when we replace with the new braking pads, there won't be any space for the disc brakes. So we just push it in between and reset those. And it's going pretty well on the brake I have, but the mistake is, you see, there is more distance here. Huge mistake, and none of the tutorials I've seen say about it. Not even the one I did before. When you feel a lot of resistance, it's going pretty hard. Don't use a lot of force because you can damage your brakes. So first off, I would not just push against the pivots after removing the pads. I'm still having the pads and pushing against the pads. But if there is lots of resistance, I felt it, for example, on the Avid Juicy brakes, we need to do one additional thing. I'm going to show you that. Here is what we should do when we feel a lot of resistance resetting our pistons. I want to have my braking lever positioned horizontally so that I don't lose any oil. In this case, in Shimano brakes, it is the mineral oil. And here I have my bleeding port, which I'm going to open. And now I can very slowly and easily reset my pistons. Why so? If I wouldn't do it and I would still push against my pistons, what will happen? All the hydraulic, the oil will be pushed into this reservoir, and you could see the oil being squeezed out from in between the sealants, the seals that you have here, and you just basically damage your whole system. So opening the bleeding port or opening the reservoir with the oil here will help with that. Do it very, very carefully, keep it clean, and if you do it like that, it will be easier and safer for the brakes. The next but not the last step is simply removing our pads. Now, Doesn't matter what kind of brakes you're using, what model you have, you're gonna have some type of locking system for your pads. In this case, it's a pin that I have to just squeeze in on the inside so that I will be able to push it through the holes, 2 little holes. So I'm using pliers for that, and it's coming pretty nicely. All right, this is how it looks like. Now I'm free to remove the braking pads. Now on different brakes, the pads will either go up or down. In this case, I'm just pushing those downwards. You can remove one by one, sometimes they go by 2 very nicely. This is how this one looks like. It's not too thin, you could still use it. I'm just doing that for the sake of this video and the testing and comparison I'm gonna do. So here is how it looks like. That's the spring that's in between these pads and these 2 pads. Very easy thing. Now I'm gonna push in the new ones. Before installing the new braking pads, one super important thing, and the last and fourth mistake that many, if not the most, of people do. We should clean the caliper and degrease it. That's the very good idea to do it right now. So I'm just using my brush to clean it, and then I'm using some kind of rag and the degreaser for that. But the mistake is to forget about degreasing our disc brake rotor. So this little thing here. Why so? Because when we do anything with our bike, I have removed the wheel, so we touch the chain, we touch the derailleur, it can be dirty, and sometimes we touch the rotor and it's already contaminated. When we put a contaminated rotor with the new braking pads, it may be a disaster. So degreasing it all well is very important. One additional info. Even though this bio degreaser works very well for degreasing the chain and the cassette, the drivetrain and other parts, I don't think it's that good for my disc brake rotors. Maybe because of it was because of the paper I was spraying it on. I'm gonna try it with the rack, but I think that just the solvent I've been using so far, and it was something like that, would just work better. Alright, everything is clean and ready for the new braking pads. I'm going to show you this process on the old ones. It's a good example because we have the info on the pads that this is the resin pads. That's one thing. And also check out with different models of the calipers whether you have the left and the right one specific. Here we don't have such a problem, so doesn't matter whether I put it like that or just like that. Now just be patient, do it slowly and push it right in. I think I don't have to remind you that we do not touch the compound with the fingers, with the gloves, doesn't matter. We want to keep it clean. It's time for the pin. The job is done. Putting the wheel back on will show me whether there is any rub between the braking pads and my rotor. I could sometimes just readjust the position of the caliper, which I show you on some other episode, but basically this is it, and you know the 4 biggest mistakes in this process. Thanks for watching. See you soon. Bye bye.